Thatcherism in 5 minutes, it can't be done. Jamie picked up too much. You can't do it. You can't change the laws of politics. Yes, I can. I'm going to do Thatcherism in 5 minutes, but it means that you're going to have to pay attention. Let's start off by looking perhaps at two of the most important quotations that Thatcher ever delivered. You need to spend time talking about these, thinking about these, largely because we've got this horrible phrase here, there's no such thing as society, but that is always taken out of context. No such thing as society. Well, what is then a living tapestry of men and women if it is not a society? Spend some time with these quotations. Pause this video. Read these carefully, because if you can understand those, then you can understand Mrs. Thatcher. But this is where we're going to start, and let's push on. Thatcherism, neoconservatism. The big point is that they're very, very skeptical about the government's ability to deliver progress or to engineer change. As Thatcher said in that previous quotation, no government can achieve anything except through people. That is the overriding policy, and that is made manifest through economic policy, where we focus on growth, where the government creates conditions conducive to growth, so that, in other words, people can go out there and maximize their growth. How do you do that? Well, you do that by delivering economic stability and economic efficiency. The theory goes, if you have stability, if you have efficiency, then people can make effective judgments, people can make reasonable assessments about what's right for the future and position themselves accordingly. You can't do that if everything's going to hell in a handbasket, and where some people have got advantages that you simply can't access. So we have a level playing field, and then we keep it level with economic stability and economic efficiency. The interesting thing is, if you do that, then what you do is you create a strong and stable society, because everyone has the same interests at heart. Everybody is interested in working hard, making money, and doing well. Now, that's basically this aspirational society. So we have this idea that if everyone's a capitalist, everyone's a good little capitalist, then we have a strong and stable society. The problem is, for Thatcher, that wasn't enough. She also wanted a degree of social and moral conformity, most notoriously probably Clause 28. Clause 28 was an evil piece of legislation that we will discuss in due course. Possibly caused more direct suffering and hatred than any other Thatcher policy. Contentious. But anyway, we'll deal with that later. Let's have a look at neoliberal economic policy. Again, it's that idea that the government cannot hope to engineer economic growth. Things are just far too complicated, and there's no guarantee you're being disinterested. Instead, they say you have to create the conditions for growth. If you create the conditions for growth, then individuals will go out and they will improve their own economic well-being. And if they're doing that, then everyone gets better. So a rising tide lifts all boats. So we're just big fans of growth. That's a good thing. And we are not fussed about relative poverty. Mrs. Thatcher once memorably said that this was the politics of envy. So we don't care if people have got a different car for every day of the week, as long as everybody has at least a car. Mrs. Thatcher notoriously said the definition of failure was anybody over the age of 30 riding on a bus. I'm paraphrasing, but not very much. Thatcherite social policy. Well, it's again this idea of a living tapestry of men and women. A living tapestry is a society. But look, everybody has to sort themselves out. Take responsibility for yourself. Stop projecting your problems onto the state and looking for a solution. Society does matter. It's just not the same thing as the state, which is essentially something that Cameron paraphrased fairly recently. So we have society. Society is essential, but it can only be improved if individuals improve their own lot. Change cannot come from above. The government cannot improve society. And only improving individuals can improve society. And so society becomes strongest if there's a common sense of identity. And so that means that no one's leeching off the state. Everybody is working hard. Now, the key point here really is that these reforms fundamentally reshape British society. We had fewer people employed in traditional working class jobs, largely because manufacturing and industry was dramatically scaled back. And at the same time, we had a vastly expanded ownership of capital, both in terms of shares and houses. And the net result was this vastly expanded middle class that was intrinsically hostile to socialism and even social democracy. Why? Because they didn't want to lose their entrepreneurial jobs and their shares and their housing. If we'd had a social government coming back in, then we would have had massive nationalisation, both in terms of buying back council houses and buying back those nationalised industries, the privatised industries, sorry. But what this matters for you, it matters across the entire board. But we need to look at it like this. Pre-Thatcher, okay, we had a large number of people employed in low-skilled, working-class jobs, living in council houses. At the same time, we had a relatively narrow middle class. These are the entrepreneurs, the white-collar workers, if you will. And we had a significant upper class. This was the capital-owning gentry, the idle rich, if you will. Again, I'm paraphrasing here greatly. It's a massive simplification. In came Thatcher. Now, we said that we virtually deconstructed Britain's manufacturing and industrial base, and as a result of which, there were far fewer jobs there. So we see far fewer people employed in manufacturing jobs, living in council houses, basically being excluded from the capitalist game. At the same time, what we've done is we've dramatically reduced the bunches of people who sit around doing nothing. The capital that these guys had, all of the extra capital that these guys had, has essentially been redirected into there. And at the same time, all of these people who were previously working in lower class jobs, well, they've now moved out of that and they've become entrepreneurs. That's the theory anyway. And here we've seen transfer of assets. So we've got a two-pronged attack, and the net result of that is this. We have a vastly expanded middle class. So post-Thatcher, we have this. Now, why is that still relevant? It's still relevant because these guys are always going to vote Labour, whereas these guys are always going to vote Conservative. But that by itself is not going to be enough to win the election. Now, because these were Thatcher's creation, initially they inclined to vote with the Conservative bloc. And that meant that Labour lost elections, and it lost them regularly. It lost, of course, in 1979, 1983, 1987, 92. Then in came Blair. And Blair said, we have to reposition the party. We can no longer look exclusively at this particular section here. We need to get at least some of that bloc if we want to win. And only by winning can we get reform. And so New Labour was created. And New Labour was created with one reason only. And that was to win power. And it was going to win power by taking over this bloc here. This bloc, it didn't really worry about, because these lot were always going to vote Conservative. Sorry, were never going to vote Conservative, excuse me. What New Labour had to do was to create support within that bloc. And everything that New Labour did was designed to deliver that particular bloc on the assumption that these guys would come with. What we're looking at now is a post-New Labour environment whereby these crowd here feel they've been cheated by New Labour, and so they have voted Corbyn because they still matter. The problem is that all of the Labour MPs come from this bloc, and they realise that if they drift left, then they're going to lose their jobs. You might call me cynical, but then I do teach politics. I look forward to discussing this with anyone who's interested, and probably even those of you who aren't. Speak to you soon. Bye.